Welcome to Sober Solutions. We are a weekly recovery podcast not affiliated with any particular 12-step or recovery program. However, you may hear us mention them. My name is Jason, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Chris, and I'm an alcoholic and addict.
My name is Ben. I'm an alcoholic and addict.
And welcome back to Sober Solutions podcast. Tonight is episode 31. And we're going to be talking about the topic of forgiveness. And specifically, I want to know about how you are forgiving yourself for all of the damage that you may have caused in the past. We're going to talk about, how we have experienced forgiveness in our lives over the last year. And then one thing I'm really interested in hearing from you guys tonight is knowing that we have done some shameful or regretful things in the past, still understanding that we are not doormats and that people have harmed us, how it's been to forgive others. And if you found that easy or not, or if you're still struggling with that. So Chris, why don't you kick us off tonight?
Yeah, thank you. I think forgiveness is very, very difficult. Forgiveness and recovery, I would say, is even more exponentially difficult. Forgiveness is difficult because, it doesn't change the past, but what it does is it enlarges the future. There's two types of forgiveness. I think you can either forgive others or forgive yourself. And I'm sure we'll dive into forgiving others like you discussed, but I think what I struggle with the most is forgiving myself. I get stuck in this constant loop of the what ifs. What if I didn't pick up, and where would our lives be if I didn't do X, Y, Z? I have two kids, as everyone knows, and it's hard not to think how my actions have change their lives. And, obviously it's pointless to sit there and harp on what's been done. I can't change the past, but to sit there and forgive myself for affecting, two of the three people that I love most in this world is a very challenging thing. Financially, we'd be in a better shape. Thank God that they're really young, and I hope that I haven't affected them too much emotionally, but you never know. And like I said, I do constantly sit there and just think, what if? And then I get in this point where I think of myself in a very negative light. And that's not healthy. I know that in life, I have great intentions. I would never in my life do anything to harm my kids purposely. But as you guys know, addiction makes you do things that is completely out of the realm of what your intentions would, what you would do. You would never put them in harmful situation. Well, I've put them in dangerous situations. I would never get high around my kids, but I've said this before, but I've been high around my kids, and that dives into having others forgive you. I'm sure my wife has a very hard time getting over that, and intentions versus reality, they don't always align when you're in active addiction.
So do you think that forgiveness, and specifically in your case, Chris, not forgiving yourself or not forgiving yourself to the fullest extent, do you think that that's had an impact on your recovery process over these last 10, 11 months?
I would say yes. I see people that are much further along in their emotional maturity. And when I say that, obviously everyone's different. Some people may do well in forgiveness and struggle in whatever, fill in the blank. I think forgiveness is the thing that I struggle with the most. And I would say, as far as my development in recovery, what it does is it makes me stay in an emotional state that I don't want to stay. It's very easy for me to think of the past and then think that, pardon my language, that I'm a piece of shit. And I know that I'm actually not this bad person. I know that I want to do the right thing, have my children grow, be a good role model. But as far as how it affects my daily recovery, if I was able to truly forgive myself and move on, I think I would be further along in this process. But it is what it is, and the fact that I am where I am, and I don't think I can push anything. I could just continue to try to grow, communicate, talk to my sponsor. I talk to my sponsor a lot about forgiveness. And I'm the one with the addiction, and I find myself thinking that I have to forgive my wife. And I know she wasn't the one in addiction. However, for certain situations, I do think about reasons to forgive her. And I get in this, this like time loop almost where I want to forgive, but I can't forgive. And then I think negative thoughts about myself. And the process of working through that is what recovery is. And, not comparing myself, I just think some people are better at the forgiveness process than I am.
It's well said, Chris. And Ben, thinking about this concept of self-forgiveness, have you been able to forgive yourself for past actions, or how is this journey going for you?
Oh, I don't want to talk about forgiveness. Oh, when you texted us and you're like, tonight's topic's forgiveness, I was like, all right, cool. It's going to be great. I'm going to talk about it a lot. And then as we sat down, I was like, shit, I haven't really touched forgiveness in my recovery yet. And I shouldn't say that I haven't touched it. Like, I don't know if it's, I haven't purposely tried to dive into it, but I remember something in rehab. It was one of the seminars that they did, and it was about forgiveness. And like, forgiveness is a choice. Like, I forget what the 4 steps are, but it's like you identify the issue or the problem with the person, you take in consideration other outside circumstances, were they doing the best that they could, etc. You make a decision to forgive them or to not forgive them, and then you're at peace with that decision. And so, like everything else in recovery or in early recovery, I was like, yeah, all right, well, I'm going to forgive everybody, we're good, and just kind of move on. And that didn't work. And so, yeah, forgiveness is just a whole lot. It's like an octopus. The tentacles touch everywhere, and there's, will my daughters forgive me? Will my ex-wife forgive me? Will my family forgive me? Will my friends forgive me? Will I forgive others? Have I forgiven others? And I think that it's just become too much to try to focus on. So I kind of just pare it down to this, just for today mentality of like, 10 step it and like, do I need to be forgiven? Do I need to forgive somebody? And because it's almost, I feel like it would almost be too overwhelming to try to figure out. Well, it's not. I don't even know if that it would be too overwhelming to figure out if people are forgiving me. I just don't. Today, I don't need that validation of whether, like, because again, if I'm going with the idea that it's a decision that I make to forgive somebody, well, that's somebody else's decision if they're going to forgive me. And I can't spend time trying to figure out if they're going to forgive me or not. It can't influence me in terms of who I am or what I'm doing, as long as I'm, working my program and doing the next right thing. Like if they still don't forgive me, okay, then they're entitled to not forgive me. But like, I think, I know Chris and I share this this uh, bond, if you will, of having young kids, and his are younger than mine. So hopefully they've been spared the emotional roller coaster that mine have gone through. And it's literally, it's one of those things that I don't know if they're 11 and 6, and they handle it pretty well for the most part, but not always great because they're 11 and 6. So it's like literally the time to figure out if they'll forgive me is like 10 years down the road, when they've identified if I need to be forgiven, and then if they can get to that spot. So for me, it's like, okay, well, and those are the people that I want, and my ex-wife too. I like the forgiveness from her would be, again, it's not something I'm seeking, but going through this process of recovery, I've realized how much I influenced her, or what a negative influence I was on her and her life. And so it's like, yeah, that my bad, my bad, and so yeah, that would be, it would be nice to get that forgiveness, but again, it's just not something I'm seeking every day.
So you mentioned the 10th step, and taking that daily inventory. For those who aren't part of an AA or NA program, it's really taking an inventory and looking at how you are doing in that day so that you can continue to make better choices, take better actions the next day. Since you're part of this program, the fourth step is really all around um, looking at past harms. And then in the eighth and ninth step, taking those harms, making a list of people that you need to make amends to. And then in the ninth step, making those amends. And, part of me wants to say that's part of the forgiveness process. But what has your experience been in doing those amends, going to someone and saying, hey, here's how I wronged you, and I'm taking accountability for that. I'm sorry for that. Were you looking for forgiveness there, or were you not? Or did you get any forgiveness there? Or what's your relationship to that?
No, I don't think that I was looking for forgiveness, because my sponsor kind of prepped me for, like, listen, their reaction is going to be their reaction, and whatever that is fine. Like, so don't, like, so I went into it with no expectations, and again, I just like I didn't need forgiveness because it wasn't my place to ask for it. Um, because it's just, I looked at those different. I don't necessarily look at those 12 steps in like here's like, how do I want to say this? It's not, I don't look at the amends as like something that I have to do for my program to um to continue on with my life. I look at them as, you know, the first three steps are, hey, you don't have this at all. Whatever you think, like, you, not only do you not have it, but you need something else. And then 4 through, like, 8 and 9 are like, hey, this is how you've been screwing up. Not only do you not have this, but here's how you've been screwing up. And we're going to look at all of it. We're not going to, if you only want to take out some of it, then you're only going to shortchange yourself because you're going to hold stuff back. And then 5 is admitting it to another person so that you can see it's just not that damn scary. Like, you can wrong people, you can admit it, and then you can move on. And then this, so it's this process of not so much asking for forgiveness in my eyes, but for realizing that you can be in a position to ask for forgiveness. Whether or not you get it is, completely relevant to the situation. But so for 10, that's where I think you find yourself. I go back to what you said about the not being a doormat. Like, it's, I think I use that on myself probably more than I don't want to say more than most, but it just becomes this thing where it's like when you 10 step it, it's really easy to be like, okay, how'd you screw this up today? And it's like, it's just, again, being okay with the idea that you're not perfect today. And so I don't kind of look at the amends as a chance for forgiveness. The amends are just to, if there's somebody in your life that you've wronged, you have the opportunity to say, hey, listen, I know I've wronged you. And it was a byproduct of this behavior, and this is how I'm changing that behavior, and so, yeah, it's like I said, forgiveness is just such a murky topic for me because it can get so disorganized that I try to, I don't want to say I try to stay away from it. I try not to swim so deep into it.
I liked what you said about not searching for forgiveness when you're doing your amends, because I think that takes away from the amends process. If I'm walking into an amends hoping that this person forgives me, I'm not there for the reason that I think I should be. I should be there to clean up my side of the street, to take accountability and ownership of my past actions. And if they forgive me, they forgive me, like you said. If they don't, which has happened, then they don't. And that's their choice. One thing that I want to ask both you and Chris is, you both mentioned your children. Now, do you think that not being able to get that forgiveness or even have like that in-depth conversation with your young kids around recovery and what has happened, one, do you think that's really top of their mind? And two, is them not forgiving you in a sense holding you back in your recovery somehow, or are you kind of waiting for that?
For myself, I think due to their age, my kids are 4 and 1, where Ben's are a little older. What is it? She 12. He 11 and 6. Okay, so they're not at an age where they're actually processing. So in one regard, I think it's harder because I can't have that in-depth conversation saying, Daddy has a problem, Daddy's doing this. I want you to be open, honest, and willing to talk if you have questions. I can't have that conversation due to their age. But what it does allow me to do, and what I am doing, is doing a living amends. My way of quote unquote seeking forgiveness, and you guys said it very well. You can't expect someone to come in and just say, okay, everything's all right, you're good. But what I can do is each day try to do better, try to do a living amends, and in the future have an open and honest conversation about Daddy's past. And that's kind of where I'm at with that. Ben, I'm curious what your answer is, being a different age group. Before you do that, I've never heard that. Murphy's topic, please elaborate. I feel like I'm well versed. I've never heard that.
Yeah, it's ugh. Yeah, this is such I'm not avoiding the question. It's such a hard topic to talk about because there's just so much uncertainty, because they are at this impressionable age. Like, there's just, they understand that I went away. They understand that I didn't come home. They understand that mom and dad got divorced. They understand that those are realities, but they don't understand necessarily why. It's because they have not yet been exposed to the world. And so I'm obviously a little closer than you are to having to deal with it, but it really is, it's a living amends, because I don't subscribe to the notion that if I wasn't an alcoholic that I wouldn't have been divorced. I don't think think that that would have been true. It definitely didn't help things, but it just we didn't have the type of relationship where either one of us wanted to work on it, and for her probably rightfully so, and so I know she didn't take that decision lightly, but this so I'm kind of in this place where it can be really easy for me to, like, when we talk about forgiveness, we could talk, I could get really, I could throw a real good pity party for myself. That I was robbed of the chance of, getting to make a glorious comeback. But it's just not healthy. It's just not the reality, if I'm being honest about it. So it becomes, what do I do in the interim? How do I change? How do I make that living amends when I don't get to see them every single day? And it does come from that being open and honest, and letting them know that that is confusing. It's confusing for me. Like, and I went through it. Like, I still, like, that whole time in my life was such a blur, that it's just very, it's a lot for me to process. So then to try to put that on, the mind of a kid, just it's almost too much. So it becomes one of those things where my living amends is to just be open and honest with them about it, answer any questions that they have, and give them credit, because kids are way smarter than we tend to give them credit for. So it's not something that I can run from. It's just also not something that today I can fix or heal. And so I that's really where I subscribe to the one day at a time principle, because it's literally like I could rack myself with so much guilt over what I've done, and the things that I could say got me to this position, that it would just completely deflate me as a person, and that's just not who I want to be today.
Yeah, this shows that, once again, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, the feelings are all the same. Jason's going to discuss his relationship with forgiveness, but we have different age children. We have, grew up in different parts of New Jersey, but the feelings of forgiveness and where we're at, and the kids, like, all that is still the same. We talked a lot about resentment and guilt, and I think getting stuck in the past and feeling resentment and bitterness only makes it more difficult to find happiness in the future. I guess, Jason, what have you done to let go of those items and try to focus on recovery and not get stuck in that, poor me, I'm a bad person for everything I've done? Because I'm sure we could all sit there and just make a list of all the harm we've had. How do you get past that? What tools do you use?
Well, this was also a journey for me, just like the two of you have described as well. And one thing, when I was going into rehab, I was talking to a couple sober people beforehand, and something that someone said to me was, when you're in there for the 28 days that you're there, learn how to forgive yourself. And I didn't know what she really meant. I did, in theory, but I took that on. And I remember I was in my room, and it was either in between classes or at the end of the night. And it was early on, probably maybe a week and a half in, where I actually looked into the mirror and I said, I forgive you. And it was so hard. It was so hard because at that time, I hated looking in mirrors because all I saw was myself. And I didn't like the person that was looking back at me. And I had to do it a couple times because the first time it was just an exercise. The first time it was just words. And then I realized that there's so much that I could bog myself down with. I'm in this institution for a purpose. I'm there to learn. I'm there to get and stay sober. I'm there to make connections with people, whether I kept them or not. Unfortunately, I kept them with the three of you here. But I was there to learn, and learning how to forgive myself was big. And there's something that has always been ringing in my mind, and it really relates to this concept of one day at a time. If I'm worried about what's going to happen tomorrow and how people are going to treat me tomorrow and how I'm going to respond to things tomorrow, that's going to bring up my anxiety. And if I'm worried about the stuff that I've done in the past, that's going to make me depressed. And so by living in this moment, just trying to do and doing the next right thing and the next right thing and the next right thing, then it helps me stay the person that I am today. And of course, there's going to be things that I want to change. I choose one thing. What's one thing that I need to do better tomorrow than I did today? And sometimes it's just forgiving myself for snapping at my sister, for not listening in a meeting, for showing up late to something. Those things aren't consequential in terms of they're gonna each individual thing is gonna take me out. But if they keep adding up, it's gonna bog me back down, and I'm gonna start getting depressed. There's this quote by, I think he's a theologian, Lewis Smedes. He says, "To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you." And that quote just sums up what forgiveness is for me. When I forgave myself, I remember I did two things in rehab that really stuck with me. One, I put all my bullshit up on a shelf and I said, "Hey, higher power, take care of this." The other thing is I started to love myself, and forgiving myself was a big part of that. And once I did that, it felt like I stepped into this new existence. And I don't think it's like you forgive yourself and that there it is. It's over. You're done with. You never have to forgive yourself for anything else again. I think it's a journey, because we're human beings and we fuck up sometimes. And knowing that I have today to fix it, and hopefully I have tomorrow to make it even better, I get to then live then instead of worrying about the mess that I created.
I really like what you said about not being able to, or having a tough time looking at yourself. That reminds me of, I really like what you said about having a tough time staring in the mirror, having a tough time looking at yourself because all you saw was yourself. That reminds me of the 30 for 30 about Chris Herron, the NBA basketball player, the star, and he was heavily addicted he was an alcoholic, he was a drug addict. And a story that always stuck with me on that documentary was how his wife noticed when he got sober that his razor moved from the shower to the mirror, and she didn't understand why. And he said the exact same thing. He said, for years, I could never stare at myself while shaving because I hated what was looking back. And, that just shows the power of recovery. It's something. And then I also relate to forgiving yourself for the small things because they add up to the bigger things. So not listening in a meeting, or maybe you cut somebody off. Today, for example, I had a pretty contentious meeting with an owner. I'm running a project. The owner didn't like how I stopped something. It was a safety issue, and I was trying. But regardless, his perception was that we were trying to not work that hard and we were being lazy. And I snapped because my intention was to keep the guys as safe as possible. And, I felt I had this gut like feeling for the last day because, I got heated and it got really, like I said, contentious. And you know what? I forgave myself and I apologized to him as well. And, like you said, he didn't take it actually. He didn't take it well. But at the end of the day, I was cleaning my side of the street and I don't have that feeling inside anymore. I really, honestly, I know what my intentions were. I know that I tried to apologize for my role in this situation. And those small things add up to becoming a more quote unquote recovered person. And that's part of the journey.
Yeah, I don't tend to find myself in those situations that much anymore because of my effort to stay present. And it's because I actively try to stay in the moment. For so long it was like I would be so excited about a situation, and then I would get into the situation, and then I would find myself getting excited about the next thing that was coming because I was just like, what's next? What's next? What's next? And that's just not the way it is in that today. And that could be in it. That could be in a meeting that like I found myself in a handful of meetings where about 12 seconds in, it's like, this doesn't have anything to do with me. The old half second principle of like, within a half a second, you should know how this affects you and what your role is going to be. And, for me, I think it's just, I don't know where it comes from. I think it's a learned thing that I've kind of gotten over time is that, and I think I've been able to put a name on it now with this idea of acceptance, and page 417, and the acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. Whatever's going on in your life is the most important thing to you, and whatever's going on in somebody else's life is the most important thing to them. And one of the things that would happen at work, taking 911 calls, and they would, we would have some sort of emergency going on where it's this massive job or whatever, and it's an emergency. And then some lady from, the other side of town calls, and it's like, oh, my dog ran away. And it's like, internally, you want to be like, lady, don't you know what I have going on in here? No, she doesn't. She doesn't. It's because, it's very easy for us to hear one thing and then make a judgment about something. And so, to Chris's story about, hearing, this client hearing one thing and then making a reaction based off of it, he didn't have all of the information, and so for me in those situations, I just turn it to, hey, this person doesn't know everything that I know, and that's okay. And so in terms of, so for me, I mean, I do take these proactive steps to try to make sure that I don't find myself in a place where I need to ask for forgiveness, because I hate asking for forgiveness, because I hate being wrong. I hate being wrong. I hate being wrong. I hate having to ask for forgiveness because it sucks. And it's just, so for me, it's about getting out in front of those things, which starts with being honest, and it starts with being honest with myself, and then being honest with those around me. And then, because for so long, to echo the couldn't look in the mirror sentiments, I couldn't look in the mirror for like the last 2 years of my addiction. Like, I hated it. And now I don't mind it so much. It's, I'm not saying that I'm, Fabio over here, but it's, I don't look like Jason, but, it's not so bad these days.
I like how you're I like how you were honest there. You caught yourself about your intentions there. Good job. I just actually before this episode, when we picked the topic, I looked up forgiveness. Did a quick Google search, forgiveness and recovery, just to kind of understand other people's thoughts. And I have this stat that I thought was very interesting. It said one national poll by Gallup showed that 94% of Americans believe that it is important to forgive others. Yet the exact same poll shows that less than 50% had actually tried to forgive those who offended them. So although forgiveness is something that's important, it seems, people just don't know what forgiveness looks like. They don't know how to do it, or maybe they find it too painful to actually do the whole process. So I just thought that was interested in importance versus what people actually do.
So I got a phone call or a text message earlier today from my ex-husband, who I haven't talked to in a year. And he wanted to connect, and he wanted to have another conversation, just because he needs to continue to process some stuff for us to have any type of relationship. And, for me, as I've been thinking about this, having a relationship with him, for as mild as it may be, maybe a text on his birthday, or maybe, a call on Christmas or something like that. I still want to have that, because for me, I spent 8 years of my life with someone. I don't want to just throw that away. And, there are times that I think about him and I hope he's doing well. But he wants to have this conversation. And I'll tell you, a year ago, I would not have been in the mindset for it or been in the place to be able to have even the quick phone call that we had today. Because I have forgiven myself for the things that I've done, and I've forgiven him for the things that he's done. And even though during our amends, he apologized for something very specific that I'm not going to share, but he didn't really apologize for anything else or take responsibility or ownership or anything else. Not that I was looking for that, like we were talking about, Ben, but he just didn't do that. And I didn't have an ability to forgive him then, but I did the work afterwards to be able to forgive him, and before actually having the conversation to do my amends with him, to have that level of forgiveness that he was doing the best he could at that time, just like I was doing the best that I could at that time. And it's hard. I mean, life is hard. And if I couldn't forgive him, I couldn't be in this space now where I'm able to have a conversation with him. And so, for as little of a relationship as we have now, it's still something, and that means something to me.
Back into, making decisions with 2% of the information, you came into that situation looking for, him to maybe take ownership of something, and that's not what he was coming into the conversation to do. He wanted something else. He wanted validation about something or closure for something, and so him not working a program of recovery, not that he should because he's sober, he's a normie, but it becomes this, he might not have those introspective tools that we now have, that you can walk away from a conversation like that and go, you know what, that didn't go the way I wanted it to go. But then again, that's just, there is a great example of us imposing our own will. Like, for me, there are rarely conversations that don't go the way that I want them to go, because I stopped trying to make them go the way that I wanted them to go, and so whatever it shall be, shall be. But yeah, I mean, it's that is a a sentiment that I do understand, that, you had a relationship with somebody for an extended period of time, and you don't want to just throw that all away. But at the same time, it becomes, well, what does that relationship look like? And what does that, it becomes this question of what value does it add to your life? And I think that's, if we're asking those questions in all of our affairs, I think that, really any situation, anytime you're not listening to a meeting, or you're getting snappy with a client, or, you're trying to rush through the zoo because you just want to be done with it. I think it becomes, well, what's my goal here? What is going to be the best? Is this going to have an outcome that is positive for me? So, I think that's a, I didn't want to talk about forgiveness, and I think that I've forgiven myself for that.
Well said, Ben. Well said. Well, great conversation tonight, guys. I think we're going to keep it short and sweet, to the point. And as always, each and every single one of our episodes is dedicated to the still sick and suffering alcoholic and addict, especially the individual who's going to pick up for the first time tonight. Have a great night, guys.
Have a good night.
Have a great night.
We appreciate your liking and subscribing to our podcast. If you liked what you heard today and would like to support our podcast, feel free to Venmo $1 to our virtual basket at Sober Solutions Podcast. We want to hear from you too. If you have a comment, question, topic, or would like to come on the show, find us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at Sober Solutions Podcast. Or you can shoot us an email to sobersolutionspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And if you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show.